Alright, welcome back to Game 10 of Lucid's 2022 tournament, where we were playing Phlegra. It was turn 53. We have some mages launching a magic phase attack here. The Dire Portent, always good news. This is Alm casting Earthblood Deepwell. A little sad since this is probably the global that we would like the most, but we just haven't really found enough Earth Gems, and we have also probably spent too many Earth Gems. Our hero Tyrant was mentally attacked by an enemy, but managed to resist. Very happy about that. This is our fellow that's locking down that underwater fort. And we have a whole slew of battles, many of which are ours, most of which were on the defensive floor, and a few other battles that we caught that are other people's. But first up is our Magic Phase attack. So this is where we're trying to jump on top of one of Atlantis' raiders. This is pretty much air elementals. We did bring another fellow for some of our earth summons, just as cover for these mages, right? Because they have nobody here to protect them. Probably overkill, since there's no province defense investment, really. You know, we couldn't be assured of that. I think we are going to go through, another round of air elementals. So this is an excellent result, right? We squish them immediately. We've seen how effective air elementals are against these thugs. So definitely happy with that result. We do also find some gear, which is really nice, but we probably spent more gems than we needed to. I think, all things considered, crafting gear is pretty expensive, but we spent a lot of gems even just to move the mages out, and then, they spent a decent amount of gems to create the elementals and the summons. So I think overall this is still in our favor, but maybe not quite as good as it looks at first glance. Still, definitely happy to be rid of that raider. Then we have a battle where Ulm is attacking Atlantis. We have a pretty serious army here, a communion, a lot of rangers, not really much of a front line. And then let's see, this looks like probably, yes, a Wind of Death trap, though he has been paralyzed, so that is good news. He did not manage to get his spell off. Let's bring up the battle timer and see, battle round 2. And Ulm has managed to get anti-magic up, so that does look like a turn 1 anti-magic cast to me. Right, because this is on battle round 2 that they have that. And in that version of events, they would have been fine since they paralyzed that fellow. Unfortunately for Ulm and ourselves in a lot of ways, that was a replay bug. And in the actual version of events, Atlantis managed to get that Wind of Death off, and still pretty painful. Ulm, of course, is even more susceptible to Wind of Death, any kind of magic resistance things. It's not good for Ulm. Atlantis does lose their Wind of Death caster, so that's significant, but, trading it out for 16 mages, I think these Black Priests, are indeed mages, along with quite a few troops, definitely worth it, I would say. Then we have a battle where Marignon is attacking Utgard, so this is interesting. I definitely don't remember the exact diplomatic situation, so we'll have to see if Marignon has made some other attacks that we didn't catch. Kind of an interesting use of an assassin here. He has a lot of the Pokemon items, so lifelong protection and a bottle of water. He also is an arena champion, it looks like, so he's lucky, but still this is kind of a little bit dangerous. You never know when, some random crossbow bolt is going to take him out, but lifelong protections are very powerful, so this guy should be able to come away with this, and indeed he does. And then we catch a battle between Mictlan and Vettiheim. This is a conflict that we were aware that was happening. It was restarted. Quite a few beast bats here, certainly not beast bats, ocelotls, only a couple beast bats. Up against a decent amount of province defense and 2 Vetti mages, just the hags though. And it looks like no gems on these ladies, and they're up against flyers, which is not great. I think they are going to be screwed. I definitely like, the effort to assist the province defense, though it is kind of a sad province defense type to be dumping. But against that level of sacred investment from Mictlan, there's just no way. So, Vettiheim loses that without inflicting any damage, and that's kind of how ocelotls go. And then we have quite a few battles against Atlantis here, most of which were on the defensive. So here we have this body ethereal group that's been rolling around for a little while, and they run into our air elemental summoners. Also this is a situation definitely where, we've probably overspent in gems. Ethereal does help against trampling, but I think like 2 air elementals probably would have been sufficient. But, we bring in 4, so hindsight is 2020. So we take out those raiders, happy about that. spending perhaps more gems than we need to, maybe more gems than we can really afford. As I recall, we're somewhat low on the gems right now. And yeah, here we have a medium to high commitment army from Atlantis. Quite a few mages here. Little light on the troops. We didn't leave any defense. So of course they're able to capture that without any meaningful losses. But yeah, 5 of their cap only, slow to recruits, very expensive. So not a large force in terms of numbers, but quite a significant mage commitment. So that could be a problem because we don't currently have anything over there that's ready to stop that. And then we're on the defensive in another location. This looks like a much cheaper raiding group. Does have some mages with it though. We've seen, how Frozen Heart can be a problem. And this runs into, looks like a chunk of our army. Not all of it though. Maybe, yeah, you know what, actually I think this is where we're patrolling on that fort. So obviously we're gonna be able to destroy this. And it looks like we're not gonna spend too many gems. Most of these gems are, most of these spells are non-gem spells. So definitely happy about that. Yeah, we lose a Healit Archer. That's fine. We don't kill that much, right? These mages are fairly cheap, but yeah, definitely a worthwhile trade for us. So happy to catch that raiding group. Overall, these battles are going pretty well for us. Really, the only question is, in terms of the attrition, like, can we keep up this level of gem spend? Here we have a group of Atlantis' Sacreds with a priest. And they are hitting, ooh, wow, we have a lot here. So again, right, we'll win this battle, definitely. But, we may spend gems here. So we were definitely expecting more. This is over near that unforted throne. So I think Atlantis could have sent a lot more. They sent kind of a low-level commitment. It's a little more than, like, low. Certainly would crush, a high level of province defense investment. But obviously when it runs up against something serious, it's not going to be able to take that. So that mostly works out for us. We do burn out the communion slaves, which, right, that's an ongoing problem. We did, we brought the minimum number that we needed, so we only burn out 2. Which is definitely the approach that I had taken for Phlegran communions, just accepting that, well, if there's a battle, we're going to burn out the communion slaves, so, just bring the minimum number. Not sure that is the best approach, but trying to create a balanced communion for Phlegra, we've talked about how it's a major problem. Sadly, the mage does escape for Atlantis. And then we're making an attack in Raga. As I recall, I think this is our main force. And Atlantis certainly could resist this, but chooses not to. So just a little bit of province defense. We'll take that out, no problem. Well, not exactly no problem, because we do burn out the communion again. So hopefully we have some replacements moving up behind it. But yeah, this is definitely a problem with this approach. It really just doesn't take much to burn these communions out, particularly when we're going with like the minimum investment. On the other hand, right, we've seen what happens with Ulm, how they're getting Wind of Death. Now, we're not Ulm, so our magic resistance is ever so slightly higher, I think. Yes, it is. Okay. I wasn't sure. Sometimes, like, the shackles have a few weird effects, so I was wondering, maybe our magic resistance isn't as high. But no, it's significantly higher because they are mages and they're not Ulmish. But ultimately, we are a human nation, right? 12 magic resistance isn't that high. So, if we had a massive stack of mages, we still have a lot of mages in this group. This is still something that could get Wind of Death. But, if we stacked 16 shackled mages on it, it would make it all the juicier for a play like that. So problems with both approaches, but in this case, we may not have a communion available to us in a major battle, which wouldn't be great. Though, as I recall, we'd made a decent amount of efforts to make sure a lot of our spells don't actually rely on the communion. So the communion should be nice to have, hopefully not required. And then we have an unexpected event in Raga. And this is definitely Atlantis cooling the province down, so they may not be interested in even fighting us, right? Murdering Winter is a thing. And I would say this is definitely an oversight on my part because, yeah, we did not cast the spell to try to fight that. I think my plan was to cast it this turn, but of course now that is too late. So assuming Atlantis has the research for Murdering Winter, there's a pretty good chance we'll eat one of those next turn, which also is not great for human level HP mages. We have some other actual unexpected events. Bad Omens, Misfortune 3, that's already how we roll. And we get an Amber Clan Mage in the lake where we're sieging that Atlantean fort. We're probably not really going to be able to utilize that guy. He was being chased by some sea trolls, so I don't know, it's kind of all upside, I guess. Oh wait, no, these are some different independents, excuse me. So it looks like Atlantis is going to lose one of their provinces to a Woodhenge Druid, probably. Yeah, so Atlantis loses a province somewhere, and I guess the Sea Trolls didn't follow this guy. So I guess we still have this fort under siege, but probably just from a single mage. So that's nice, but Atlantis definitely will be able to break that siege shortly. We do lose a scout, sadly, but we managed to kill a scout from Utgard, so that's nice. And then we still have that underwater fort under siege from our single mage, and we do have Raga under siege. This is a real siege, moderately damaged, not great, especially considering, Murdering Winter could be on the table. On the other hand, considering that we didn't fight an Atlantean army, there's a pretty good chance that Atlantis has a lot of stuff stuffed into this citadel. So a citadel with a large army in it is pretty difficult to break down. So, of course, would we like more siege strength? Definitely. But all things considered, not actually a terrible result. And I'll catch you guys after the jump. All right, this was the situation and what we did about it. First off, I was mistaken about where that mage was. I forgot we had grabbed a different lake from Atlantis. So he's here. He is aquatic, not amphibious, so he cannot come on the land. Not that useful for us, but, he's a free mage. He can site search. We have to pay upkeep on him, so that actually kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Not sure why it said that other fort was under siege. It definitely is not under siege anymore. So anyway, as we can see, no defense prepared here whatsoever. I think I am hoping that Atlantis is not going to want to move into, what is a pretty obvious trap, right? He can see that we have a pretty significant force here. And I definitely think what we have here, plus, we could potentially bring reinforcements up, could province defense dump here. Like, this would be a very dangerous move for Atlantis. So I think there's a decent chance that it doesn't make the attack anyway. And instead, we're going to go threaten the capital. Now, that said, I don't think we really have the strength in this army to actually take the capital. So this is somewhat of a bluff and possibly an obvious bluff. We'll see how Atlantis reacts to it. If they do choose to move forward, we don't have a ton in the way of defense. We are recruiting some human infantry here. We do have a decent number of mages. We're bringing forward a few more mages. We could bring forward more mages. So I do think it'll be difficult for Atlantis to actually take any forts off of us, but they certainly could rampage around for a little while, which would definitely be less than ideal. So hopefully they get pulled back to defend their capital. We'll see. In the good news department for us, not for our allies, Ulm, this army has chosen to jump on top of this throne fortification. There are a decent number of units in here, so it'll probably take Atlantis a second to crack this. We can see that it has not been cracked this turn. We actually are moving some defenses down to defend our fort in case Atlantis changes their mind and chooses to come after our fort instead. Also in the, sort of good news department, so there's this Atlantean army here that we were trying to catch with our trap. It has been revealed by Atlantis's raid. Now, they didn't actually trigger gem usage, so they didn't get to see our script, but it probably doesn't take a genius to figure out what we're planning here. So I think it's unlikely that Atlantis will jump into this. Also, this is the army from Ulm that got hit with that Wind of Death. So, it's holding down this fort. Atlantis may choose to use this army, to go knock this Ulmish army off the fort, though frankly, I expect Ulm to pull off, considering like about half of it got wiped out. Most importantly for us, we're going to hang out on Raga. We are casting Breath of the Desert here to try to heat things up, but I don't think that'll help us for a Murdering Winter cast next turn. Atlantis definitely has the research for it because we know that they have Wind of Death, and that's Evocation 7, and that's also where Murdering Winter is. They certainly have the caster for it. Their cap onlys come in guaranteed water 3, and they can ran them into water 5. That's pretty unlikely. They probably have some water 4s running around though. So with some boosters, which are easy to forge, they almost assuredly have the ability to cast this. It is 40 water gems, so maybe they don't have the water gems right now, but I think that's realistically the only thing that would be holding them back from casting that. I don't think there's any way for us to dodge it, so at this point, we're really just gambling that they don't have the gems. I think I'd felt that, since we walked into it anyway, we're going to eat one Murdering Winter, so, what's the point of trying to move out? The spell would resolve before our movement does. So I do think definitely it was a mistake to not heat this province up the turn that we were moving into it. But now that we've already made that mistake, I think sitting on top of the fort is reasonable. though it probably will end up being pretty painful. Speaking of painful, right, we don't have a communion here anymore. The good news is we pretty much only lose fog warriors from this. Everything else our mages are casting, they're able to do without the communion, so that is definitely nice. Losing fog warriors is important, right? That is painful, but I do think we have enough other stuff here that still pretty good odds that we can win a battle. But Atlantis doesn't really seem interested in a battle, right? We have some scouts in the surrounding territory. Like, we don't see any of those Atlantean forces out and about, so they're almost assuredly all inside Raga, probably waiting for that Murdering Winter. You know, that said, I don't think Murdering Winter discriminates between friendly and enemy troops, and Atlantis does have a lot of units in here, but they've been using, you know, like a lot of the ice clads, which are pretty cold resistant, so I'm not sure. I think their mages have it as well. Yeah, so I think Atlantis is going to do mostly fine with getting hit with Murdering Winter. Some of their infantry, their cheaper infantry, don't have cold resistance, so that wouldn't be great. Though I think Atlanteans, yeah, have higher than normal hit points, or at least higher than human hit points. So they're definitely better able to absorb a Murdering Winter as compared to our army, but potentially might give them pause to cast it in a province where they have a lot of their own stuff. We are moving some reinforcements up, really just to open up retreat routes. We'll probably fold this into our army, assuming it doesn't get wiped out. But we could continue to raid forward with this force. One good thing about all those troops getting pulled into the fort does mean that we have, you know, quite a few options in terms of going after Atlantis' provinces. So that covers the majority of what we're up to. We already talked about the little troop recruitment that we're doing. Otherwise, right, focusing on mages and getting more tyrants out. In terms of the wider world, it doesn't really look like a major war has broken out yet between Mictlan and Utgard. This is where they fought, and this is in Vedheim's territory, so could just be a bump, could be a trade. I don't know. A lone assassin taking one province in someone else's land doesn't really feel like the start of a major war to me. So we'll try to continue to keep an eye on that. Obviously, Vedheim not in a great spot. I think they have 3 forts right now that are cracked. They have one from Utgard here on top of a throne, and then both of these forts that Mictlan is sitting on top of have been cracked. There is still their capital, and they have, you know, 2 more forts down here in the south, so definitely not completely out of it yet, but this is not looking good. That covers the wider world, and I think that more or less covers turn 53.